Here are the top 3 ancient Greek sieges. Ancient Greece saw many instances of siege warfare in its long and fractious history. Let's have a look at 3 of the greatest ancient Greek sieges. Ancient Greece was no stranger to warfare. While battles tended to follow predictable patterns of hoplite warfare, siege became ever more important as Greek city-states evolved their war science capabilities. Over time, ancient Greeks became more skilled and competent in siege warfare. Though they never achieved the same sophistication as the Romans, Greek siege practices would become methodical, formidable, and sophisticated. We can map the evolution of warfare in ancient Greece by examining 3 great sieges. 1. Siege of Troy, 750 BC. The Siege of Troy is attested in Homeric legend through the Iliad and Odyssey. Historically speaking, this was a legend and so distant that it's very difficult to know what went on. However, historians and archaeologists have found a famous site at Ilium that they believe corresponds to ancient Troy. Though, whether this is the Troy described in Homer is debated to this day. Yet Troy still points to a profound cultural memory that informed Greek identity, and it's centered around the notion of siege. If we can get past the heavily mythologized stories of beautiful women, vengeful gods, and violent heroes, we are presented with a prehistorical telling of rudimentary siege. Homer outlines the siege as lasting 10 years, where the Achaeans besieged the Trojans at a site near the coast by the Dardanelles in Asia Minor. The Iliad shows the Achaeans and Trojans slugging it out without recourse to any real sophisticated techniques. Periodic battles at the Achaean camp or in front of the city took place, but there was no war science applied to the operations. This was an attacking army just waiting for the defenders to give up through lack of resources. Lack of supplies prevented the Achaeans from ever deploying their full effort. In this, Thucydides was spot on, as attackers, not just defenders, need massive resources to maintain a siege. In archaic and even classical Greece, those resources were not always available. Armies tended to be from archaic clans or, in classical times, from citizen militia, and this made it far less likely for long sieges, as men had to get back to their day jobs and harvests. Yet, Troy fell eventually to deception. The legendary Trojan horse, left as an honorific prize to the Trojans, was a masterful trick. Seeing the Achaeans had quit their camp, the Trojans took the horse inside their walls, embracing their own demise. Hidden Achaean warriors inside the horse opened the gates and the city fell. One of the greatest legends of all time mimics a common ancient occurrence, as many ancient cities were taken by deception, as were by force. The fall of Troy still echoes as a lesson for all history. 2. Siege of Syracuse, 415 to 413 BC. The Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404 BC, between Athens and Sparta, saw the Greeks advance their capabilities greatly. The greatest siege of the conflict took place at Syracuse during Athens' ill-fated Sicilian expedition. Sending a major expedition in support of Segesta, a local ally, Athens really sought to curb mighty Syracuse, which was aligned with her enemies Sparta and Corinth. Influenced by the hawkish demagogue, Alcibiades, the Sicilian expedition is one of history's greatest moments of military hubris. The Athenians and their allies were led by Nicias, who fortified a camp south of Syracuse and began hostilities in pitched battle. Things went in Athens' favor, though this was not conclusive. Over the coming months, the battle would be characterized by a series of fights as the Athenians sought to circumvallate the city and the defenders sought to break their stranglehold with counter walls. Fighting was fierce, but the Syracusans could not ultimately resist the Athenians progressing their circumvallation of the city. When the Athenian fleet next blockaded the harbor, Syracuse looked to be in a stranglehold. However, events turned back in the Syracusan favor with the arrival of a Spartan relief force under the general Gylippus. Bolstering Syracusan morale, it was not long until the Spartan commander was able to counter the Athenian line of circumvallation. The Syracusans capitalized and were able to cut across the Athenian works with their own counter wall, weakening the siege. A Syracusan attempt to break the naval blockade of their great harbor included the sophisticated use of divers to clear underwater obstacles from below the water lines. Cleverly strengthening the rams of their ships, the Syracusans sacrificed maneuverability for strength in ramming. This was a master strategy that did considerable damage to the Athenian navy. While the naval battle was underway, Gylippus was able to sally out of the city and overrun the Athenian fortified encampments. The Athenians were forced to move their camp into unfavorable swampy ground. Fatefully, the Athenians doubled down and sent for a second major expedition of reinforcement, led by the commander Demosthenes. With fresh troops, they managed to retake the heights at Epipoli. However, a disastrous Athenian night attack forced the Athenians back into the swamp land. The Athenian position was becoming dire on land and sea. The supply of their army would soon become a problem. A further combined attack by sea and land now convinced the Athenians that they could not win. With their fleet blockaded, Athenian troops sought to retreat inland, abandoning their siege altogether. They were harried by the vengeful Syracusans. A column led by Demosthenes was routed and taken prisoner. The second Athenian column under Nicias was overcome at a river crossing as they broke formation to desperately drink water. Slaughter ensued, and the Athenians were totally overrun. Athens had lost an irreplaceable army. 7,000 hoplites were taken alive to work out in the Syracusan quarry, an effective death sentence. The commanders Nicias and Demosthenes were put to death. Estimated overall losses were over 10,000 hoplites and up to 30,000 rowers with c-200 ships. Such losses were not sustainable for an ancient city-state. Political instability and loss of standing meant Athens was no longer able to dominate her allies as she once had. Though she would rally fantastically to survive the coming years, Athens would never win the long and bitter Peloponnesian War. 3. Siege of Thebes, 335 BC. The sack of Thebes was a short siege that took place the year after Philip II of Macedon died. Already forced to accept Macedonian hegemony after earlier defeat, Thebes had been forced to accept a Macedonian garrison in the Cadme citadel. However, a false rumor that Alexander the Great had died during a campaign in Thrace led some resentful cities, like Thebes and Athens, to revolt against Macedonian power. This was a big mistake. Alexander undertook a lightning march with his army of 30,000 men into central Greece. There to reassert Macedonian power over wavering allies, his arrival was quick and unexpected. The Thebans were totally wrong-footed. Caught in a double layer, the Thebans were surrounded while they besieged the Macedonian garrison, under Philotas, in the Cadme citadel. However, proud to the last, the Thebans would not seek terms. Alexander offered the Thebans terms for surrender, but he could not allow their refusal to go unpunished. Always a marker of extreme stress in an ancient society, the Thebans freed and armed their slaves as well as refugees and foreign aliens in the city. Women and children were sent to the temples for sanctuary. Alexander split his forces into 3 divisions, one attacking the Theban palisade around the city. A second fought the Theban main force and a third was a mobile reserve. Close quarters fighting ensued, with the Thebans being described as defiant and reckless of danger in their forlorn defense. The Macedonians were highly professional and battle-hardened and also outnumbered the Thebans. The fight hung in the balance as the Thebans put up a tremendous fight. Even the introduction of Alexander's reserves did not break the main Theban body. However, stretched to near breaking, Alexander sent Perdiccas to seize a gate that had been left unprotected by the overstretched defenders. The city was breached, and with the inner Macedonian garrison under Philotas now breaking out of the citadel, the fate of proud Thebes was sealed. The sack of Thebes was a terrible event. Alexander, mindful that he needed to subdue other restless Greek cities before his Persian campaign, made a deliberate example. All the men, 6,000, were slaughtered. The city was put to the torch and all the buildings fired. Thebes was sacked without mercy, bodies piling in the streets. Up to 30,000 women and children were taken brutally as the spoil of war into slavery. So grievous was Alexander's revenge that even years later, he was said to feel crushing guilt. Such guilt that he would forevermore grant the petition of any native Theban. Atonement for a guilty conscience.